I never thought my quiet life in the suburbs would turn into a crime scene. After 23 years in the FBI had seen the darkest corners of humanity, but nothing prepared me for what would happen in my own front yard. My name is Mark Henderson, and all I ever wanted after retirement was peace, a garden, a cup of black coffee each morning, and time with my daughter, Lily. She was 13, bright as the morning sun, and though confined to a wheelchair since a car accident 3 years ago, she carried more courage than anyone I'd ever known. Lily had a laugh that could chase away my nightmares and eyes that could melt the steel from a man's soul. We'd moved into the Maplewood Estates to give her some normalcy, to let her feel like any other kid, surrounded by neat lawns, friendly neighbors, and quiet streets. That illusion lasted barely 2 months, right until the day we met Karen Blake, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. She lived 2 houses down, her smile as sharp as glass, her words dipped in honey and venom both. She always had something to say about everything: my lawn length, Lily's wheelchair ramp, the color of our mailbox. Community standards, she'd call it, but I could see in her eyes it was never about the rules. It was about control. Her teenage daughter, Emily, mirrored her mother's arrogance. She'd roll her eyes when Lily passed by, whispering to her friends, sometimes giggling cruelly. I told Lily to ignore them, that people like that weren't worth the pain, but deep down, I hated how small it made her feel. I thought it would pass. I thought Karen was just another bored housewife with too much time and not enough purpose. I was wrong. It started small. Petty notes left on my porch: your trash cans are too visible. Your daughter's ramp violates the aesthetic code. I'd crumple them and toss them aside, unwilling to make enemies, but Karen's tone changed when she realized I wouldn't bow. One evening, while I was trimming hedges, she walked up, arms crossed, her perfume thick in the humid air. "You think the rules don't apply to you because you're some kind of tough guy," she said, her voice low but trembling. "No, Karen," I replied evenly. "I just think compassion should apply to everyone." Her face turned red, her lips tightened. "Then maybe you and your crippled daughter should find a neighborhood that's more flexible." That word, crippled, hit me like a blade. Before I could respond, Lily, who'd been by the porch feeding our dog, called out, "Dad, it's fine." But I could see her eyes fill with tears. Karen stormed off, muttering something about filing a complaint. I remember thinking that night as I tucked Lily into bed, that people like her feed on weakness. I promised myself I'd never give her that satisfaction. 2 weeks later, the HOA meeting was held at the community center, and Karen made sure everyone heard about my noncompliance. I stayed silent through most of it, letting her rant about standards and fairness, but when she mentioned removing Lily's ramp, I stood up. "You're not touching that ramp," I said, my voice calm but cold. The room went quiet. Karen's smile faltered. "You think you can intimidate me, Mr. FBI?" she hissed. I didn't answer. I just walked out, hearing murmurs behind me. I thought it was over, but that meeting lit a fuse that neither of us could stop. The next few days felt uneasy. I'd catch Karen watching our house from her window, phone in hand, pretending to take pictures of her garden. Emily and her friends would ride their bikes too close to Lily's chair, sneering, "Watch where you roll wheels." Lily tried to stay strong, she always did, but one afternoon she came inside, trembling, saying Karen yelled at her for blocking the sidewalk. I wanted to confront her, but something inside me whispered not to. Retired or not, I still carried that FBI instinct, the one that told me when danger was near. Then came that Friday evening when everything changed. The sky was tinted orange, the cicadas loud in the trees, and Lily was outside sketching the sunset from her wheelchair near our front gate. I was inside, washing dishes, when I heard shouting, a woman's voice furious, shrill. I dropped the sponge and rushed out. Karen was standing in the street, her face twisted with rage, Emily crying behind her. "Your daughter threw something at my car," she screamed. Lily was shaking, holding her notebook. I was just drawing. I stepped between them. "Karen, calm down," I said, hands raised. But she was past reasoning. She reached into her purse, her hand trembling, and before I could process it, before I could breathe, she pulled out a gun. For a split second, time froze. The sound that came next wasn't loud. It was sharp, deafening in its meaning. A gunshot tore through the evening air. Lily's sketchbook flew from her lap, red blooming across her dress. My world stopped. I remember screaming her name, diving forward, catching her before she fell. Karen's face went pale, her eyes wide as the gun slipped from her hand and clattered to the pavement. It was self-defense, she stammered, backing away, her voice shaking. She attacked me. My vision blurred. All I saw was Lily's face, her lips whispering "Dad," as blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. I pressed my hands against the wound, shouting for help, my voice breaking. Neighbors started pouring out, phones in hand, filming, gasping. Someone called 911. I remember sirens in the distance, Karen crying, Emily screaming that her mom didn't mean to. I remember the paramedics forcing me back as they lifted Lily onto a stretcher, her small hand slipping from mine. But the last thing I remember, clearer than the sound of my own heart breaking, was Karen's expression as the police arrived. Not guilt, not shock, just a quiet, calculated calm. And in that moment, as they led her away, I realized something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't afraid. Not of the cops. Not of the truth. She thought she'd get away with it. And maybe she would have, if she'd known who I used to be, because Karen Blake didn't just shoot my daughter. She started a war she couldn't possibly win. The hospital smelled like bleach and fear. Machines beeped in rhythm with my heartbeat, each one a reminder that my daughter's life hung by a thread. I stood beside her bed, staring at the pale face that used to glow with laughter. Tubes ran from her arms, her chest barely rising beneath the thin blanket. The bullet had missed her heart by less than an inch, the doctor said. She's stable for now, whispered the nurse, Abby, her eyes soft but exhausted. I nodded, unable to speak. Every breath felt like a war. Every second that passed without Lily's eyes opening clawed at my soul. I'd faced terrorists, killers, and organized crime in my years with the Bureau, but nothing prepared me for this kind of helplessness. My hands, trained to hold weapons steady under pressure, now trembled just holding hers. I kept telling myself she'd survive. She had to. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just an accident. Karen Blake hadn't pulled that trigger out of fear. It was hatred, cold, deliberate, and dangerous. And if I'd learned anything in my years as an agent, it was that people like her rarely acted alone. Detective Miles Carter showed up the next morning, a middle-aged man with a polished badge and tired eyes. I knew his type instantly. He shook my hand with a firm grip, but his smile was too practiced. Mr. Henderson, I'm sorry about your daughter. We're gathering statements, reviewing footage from the scene. His tone was sympathetic, but his eyes flickered, just enough to tell me he already had doubts about me. Footage? I asked, my voice low. There were neighbors filming. He nodded, adjusting his tie. We'll review everything. But I caught the subtle pause, the glance at his notepad, and I recognized it immediately. He was holding back. What's Karen saying? I asked. He exhaled softly. Mrs. Blake claims it was self-defense. She says your daughter threw something that hit her car, and when she approached, she felt threatened. My jaw clenched. Threatened? By a 13-year-old in a wheelchair? I couldn't stop my voice from cracking. Carter sighed. We have to follow protocol, sir. There were witnesses. Witnesses? I interrupted. You mean the same neighbors who owe Karen favors through her HOA? He didn't respond. That silence told me everything I needed to know. By the third day, the story had already hit local news. Retired FBI agent's daughter shot in HOA dispute. The headlines twisted the truth, turning my daughter's pain into clickbait. Some outlets even questioned whether I'd provoked the altercation. Karen's lawyer, an expensive suit named Rick Callahan, was already spinning her narrative, painting her as a victim. A woman alone, frightened by an ex-agent's temper, he said to cameras. I watched from the hospital room as Karen's tearful face filled the screen, her voice trembling just right, her words rehearsed. I didn't mean to shoot, she sobbed. It was an accident. I feared for my life. Lies. Every syllable was a lie. Abby came in during one of those interviews and turned the TV off. You shouldn't watch that, she said gently. It'll eat you alive. I nodded, but I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. She wasn't just lying, she was being protected. When Lily finally opened her eyes 4 days later, I was there. Her voice was weak, broken. Dad, did I do something wrong? Those words crushed me more than anything else. I gripped her hand. No, baby. You didn't. You did everything right. A tear slid down her cheek, and she whispered. She was yelling at me. I told her I didn't do anything. Then she raised something shiny. Her breathing quickened. I told her to rest, that I'd handle it. And I meant it. That night, I went home for the first time since the shooting. The police tape still fluttered on my porch, yellow against the dark. My front yard felt like a memory carved in blood. I stepped over the tape, sat on the porch, and listened to the hum of crickets. Across the street, Karen's house glowed with warm light. Curtains drawn. Calm. Peaceful. Like nothing had happened. That was when I saw it, a man leaving her porch in a dark suit, briefcase in hand. Not a neighbor. Not a cop. Too polished. Too discreet. He looked around before slipping into a black sedan with tinted windows. I memorized the license plate. That wasn't fear on Karen's part. That was coordination. I felt the old instincts return, the pattern recognition, the gut sense that something bigger was unfolding. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was an investigator again. The next morning, I visited the station. I asked Detective Carter for updates. He looked uncomfortable. We're still sorting through the statements, he said. But Mark, there's something you should know. He leaned forward, voice low. A few witnesses claim you were aggressive that night. That you threatened Karen before the shooting. My stomach turned. That's insane. He nodded. I know. But her attorneys already submitted character references, neighbors, board members. I could feel the setup tightening like a noose. You're telling me I'm under investigation? I asked quietly. He didn't answer directly. Just stay available for questioning. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked away. That silence was louder than any accusation. I drove straight to the courthouse to meet District Attorney Julia Collins, a woman I'd worked with once years ago during an FBI case. She remembered me, respected me. But even she looked uneasy when I brought up Karen. Mark, she said carefully, I know this looks wrong, but you need to be cautious. The HOA is well connected. The Blakes have ties to several city officials. I frowned. City officials? She nodded slowly. Campaign donors, zoning permits. There's money involved. And now, public pressure to de-escalate. The mayor's office wants this handled quietly. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Handled quietly? I repeated, my daughter's fighting for her life, and you want it quiet? Julia lowered her gaze. Off the record, Mark, something's off about this case. But if you push too hard, they'll turn it on you. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every flicker of light through the blinds set my nerves on fire. I sat in Lily's empty room, surrounded by her drawings, sketches of sunsets, animals, and dream houses she wanted us to visit one day. I picked up one of her sketches, stained faintly with dried blood, and felt something inside me harden. I'd spent years upholding laws written by people like the ones now protecting Karen, but I wasn't bound by them anymore. If the system wouldn't give me justice, I'd find it myself. The next morning, I went back to the hospital. Lily was sleeping peacefully, her small frame fragile under the blanket. Abby met me outside the room. There's someone asking questions about you, she whispered. A man in a gray suit. Said he's with internal affairs. My gut twisted. I thanked her, walked to the hallway corner, and caught a glimpse of him. Same man I saw at Karen's house. Clipboard badge, but his shoes gave him away. Italian leather. Not standard issue. I followed him quietly as he left the hospital, keeping my distance, every instinct alive again. He got into the same black sedan. No agency plates. No credentials. That's when I knew it for certain. This wasn't just about Karen. Someone higher up wanted this buried. They wanted me neutralized before I could expose them. But they'd made a fatal mistake. They thought I'd stop being the man I used to be. They forgot that the Bureau didn't just train me to protect lives, they trained me to hunt. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the old version of me was gone. The quiet, retired father who watered his garden, smiled at the mailman, and lived for his daughter's laughter. He died the moment Karen pulled that trigger. What was left was someone colder, sharper, the man I used to be before the Bureau stripped me down and rebuilt me into a weapon. I spent the early hours in my garage, opening an old steel case that hadn't seen daylight in years. Inside was my past, a dusty badge, a Glock I'd decommissioned after retirement, encrypted drives from old cases, and a photo of my partner Tom Reyes, the only man I'd ever trusted completely. I called him using a secure line we used back in the day. He answered after 3 rings, voice groggy but alert. Jesus, Mark. I thought you swore you'd never use this channel again. I swore I'd never need to, I replied, but someone shot my daughter. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. You serious? She's alive. Barely. And it wasn't random. I could almost hear him sit up straight. You think it's connected? I know it is. Another pause. All right, he said finally. Tell me everything. By noon, I had a folder full of evidence, or at least threads of it. Security footage from the neighborhood mysteriously missing. Witness statements rewritten between versions. HOA meeting minutes edited to remove Karen's previous threats against me. It wasn't just sloppy, it was deliberate. Someone had gone through official police channels to scrub the paper trail. I'd seen this pattern before in deep-cover corruption cases the Bureau buried for political convenience. It was the same formula. Intimidate the innocent, erase the evidence, and bury the story. Only this time, they were targeting me and my daughter. That night, I met Tom at a diner just outside town, the kind of place where the coffee's bad, but the silence is reliable. He looked older, gray at the temples, but his eyes were still sharp. I pulled some strings, he said, sliding a USB across the table. Unmarked SUV registered to a city official, Deputy Mayor Alan Franklin. He's the one visiting Karen's house. My stomach sank. Franklin? I'd met him once at a community event. Polished smile, promises about local integrity, donations to every charity in the district. He's tied to a campaign fund, Tom continued. Guess who manages it? Karen Blake's HOA. My pulse quickened. You're saying the HOA's laundering money through city contracts? Tom nodded. Looks that way. And you, my friend, just became a liability to them. I went home that night and started connecting the dots. Karen wasn't just a power-hungry neighbor, she was part of a system. The HOA wasn't about flowers or fences. It was about money, influence, silence. And when Lily saw something she wasn't supposed to, Karen pulled the trigger to keep it quiet. I remembered the week before the shooting, when Lily came home excited, saying she'd recorded bird sounds near the park using my old digital recorder. That recorder had gone missing after the shooting. My blood ran cold. If she'd accidentally recorded something incriminating, like a conversation, Karen would have had motive. I tore through her room, found the recorder hidden in her sketchbox, cracked and covered in faint traces of blood. The memory chip was still inside. I plugged it into my laptop, heart pounding, and hit play. The first few minutes were just ambient sounds, birds, wind, laughter, then faint voices, Karen and another man. The transfers are done, the man said. You sure it's clean? Karen's voice replied, confident, smug. Don't worry, Franklin owes me. If anyone snoops, I'll handle it. Then a pause, a sharp intake of breath. Wait, what's that noise? And the recording ended. Lily must have been nearby. My jaw tightened. This was it, the reason she was shot. She had unknowingly captured a conversation tying Karen and the deputy mayor to embezzlement. The next morning, I sent a copy of the recording to Tom. That's your leverage, he said, but be careful. If they know you have it, they'll come after you. He was right. That night, as I was driving home from hospital, headlights flared in my rearview mirror. Too close, too steady. I took a turn into an empty construction site, cut my lights, and waited. The car followed. I recognized the same black sedan. Before I could react, a bullet shattered my side mirror. I ducked, rolled out of the car, and crawled behind concrete slabs as more rounds whizzed past. Years of field training took over. I counted the shots, the timing, the angles. When I heard the click of an empty magazine, I moved. Silent. Precise. I flanked the shooter, slammed him against a wall, and tore off his mask. It wasn't a hired thug. It was one of Franklin's security detail, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Who sent you?" I growled. "You don't get it," he gasped. "You're already dead." He reached for his pocket, but I knocked him out cold before he could finish. I searched him, no phone, just a burner and a photo of me and Lily outside the hospital. They were watching us. I knew what had to be done. Going through the police was pointless. Carter was compromised. The DA was cornered. So I decided to go rogue. I'd expose them all from Karen to Franklin, but on my terms. I used my old bureau credentials to access archived databases, tracing Franklin's campaign funds through shell accounts. The pattern was clear. HOA fees from Maplewood Estates funneled through dummy charities into campaign donations. Karen was the linchpin. Without her, the system fell apart. And that's when I noticed something chilling. Half those donations were signed off by Carter himself. The detective investigating my daughter's shooting was on their payroll. It all made sense now. The missing evidence, the fake witness statements, the reason Karen looked so calm the night she was arrested, they'd built her safety net long before she pulled the trigger. 2 days later, I went to confront Carter. I found him in the parking lot outside the precinct, smoking beside his car. He froze when he saw me. "You shouldn't be here, Mark," he said. "Neither should you." I replied, tossing him a flash drive. "That's everything tying you and Franklin to the HOA fund. You've got one chance to do the right thing." He sneered. "You think you're still FBI? You're just a washed-up dad who can't accept the truth." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "The truth is coming, whether you accept it or not." He flicked his cigarette, eyes darting nervously. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." "You're right," I said. "Neither do they." I walked away, leaving him pale and shaking. That night, I sent the full dossier, footage, financial trails, the audio recording to multiple encrypted servers. Insurance. If anything happened to me, it would go public. I wasn't just going after Karen anymore. I was going after the entire system that let her pull the trigger and sleep peacefully after. But I also knew the closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. The hunter in me was back, but I wasn't the only one hunting anymore. Because by midnight, my phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or your daughter won't wake up next time." I stared at the screen, fury and fear twisting together inside me. They had no idea who they were threatening. I looked at Lily's hospital photo on my desk and whispered to myself, "They came after my blood. Now I'll come for theirs." The message on my phone was the final spark that ignited everything I had left inside me. Fear was gone. All that remained was resolve. I'd spent my entire career hunting monsters for the Bureau, men who hid behind power, money, and influence. But this was different. This time, the monster lived 2 doors down, and she'd put a bullet in my daughter's chest. I wasn't just after justice anymore. I was after the truth, and I was ready to burn down anyone standing in its way. The next morning, I visited Lily at the hospital. She was awake, weak but smiling faintly. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "You're doing that face again, the one you used to make when you were angry at news." I managed a soft laugh. "I'm not angry, sweetheart. I'm just making things right." She tried to nod, but her eyes closed again, slipping back into the kind of fragile sleep that made my chest ache. I kissed her forehead, walked out, and made a promise under my breath. No more hiding. That afternoon, I met Tom Reyes one last time, this time in the old bureau warehouse we used for off-the-grid work. He brought laptops, satellite uplinks, and 2 burner phones. "You sure about this, Mark?" he asked. "Once we start, there's no going back." "There wasn't any going back the moment she pulled that trigger," I said, my voice low. Together, we built the plan that would expose everything, the HOA, the money laundering, and the cover-up. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about the system that let her believe she could shoot a child and walk free. By sunset, everything was in motion. I set up a network of hidden cameras in the HOA office, Karen's home, and even the deputy mayor's private office. Tom helped me reroute live feeds through a cloud server that would automatically broadcast to public channels if the connection was severed. A fail-safe. If they caught me, the world would still see the truth. I spent the night watching the feeds flicker on my laptop screen, Karen pacing in her kitchen, drinking glass after glass of wine, arguing with someone on the phone. "No, he doesn't know," she snapped. "I took care of it." Then silence, followed by her muttering, "He won't stop." Her voice trembled on that last line, and I knew she was starting to break. The next morning, I received an email from the district attorney, Julia Collins. She'd gone through the evidence I'd anonymously sent. "Meet me at my office, 9 a.m. sharp. And Mark, don't bring anyone." Against my better judgment, I went. When I walked in, Julia looked pale, nervous. "This is bigger than I thought," she said, closing the blinds. The FBI's Internal Affairs Division just took over the investigation, but Franklin's trying to intercept it. They're burying files as we speak. She handed me a flash drive. "This is your copy. It's everything: financial trails, witness tampering, false reports. If this goes live, they all go down." I nodded, pocketing it. "Then let's make it live." She hesitated. "If you do this, Mark, they'll come for you." I smiled faintly. "They already have." That night, I went to Karen's house. The street was quiet, moonlight glinting off the windows. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, steady, calm. When she opened the door, her face went white. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, clutching her robe. "You shouldn't be within 500 feet of me." I stepped inside, my voice controlled. "You shot my daughter. You lied to the police. You tried to destroy my family. But it's over now." She backed away, trembling. You don't scare me. I have friends in high places." "Not anymore," I said, holding up my phone. "You're live." Her eyes darted to the camera icon glowing red on the screen. "Millions of people are watching right now, Karen. Every word you say, every lie you tell, it's all being recorded." Her breath hitched. "You can't, I already did." I stepped closer, voice low but firm. "You shot a 13-year-old girl because she heard something she shouldn't have. You've been laundering HOA funds for years, covering for corrupt mayor, and paying off cops to keep quiet." She shook her head, violently. "No, I don't lie." I snapped, slamming my hand on her dining table. The sound made her jump, her glass of wine shattering. "You did this. You did all of it." Her lips quivered. "They made me. Franklin said if I didn't handle it, they'd ruin me." Her voice cracked, and she collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," she whispered. "I just wanted her to stop filming us." "I didn't mean to." She looked up, realizing what she'd admitted, but it was too late. The live stream was still rolling. Within minutes, the broadcast hit social media. Thousands of viewers tuned in, comments flooding the screen. "Karen Blake confesses." HOA corruption scandal live. Retired FBI agent exposes city officials. It was chaos, and I let it spread. I turned to Karen one last time. "You destroyed your own life the moment you touched mine." I walked out as sirens began to fill the street. SWAT vehicles and police cruisers surrounded the block. The feed caught every second. Officers bursting in, Karen screaming that she'd been set up, reporters shouting questions. Across town, the deputy mayor was arrested mid-speech, his face pale as he was led away in cuffs. Detective Carter tried to flee, but was caught at the airport with a bag full of cash. The entire operation unraveled in less than 24 hours. By the next day, my name was on every news channel again, but this time, not as a suspect. Retired FBI agent exposes massive HOA corruption scandal. Reporters camped outside the hospital, hoping for a statement, but I stayed silent. The only words that mattered came from Lily, who finally woke up for good. She looked at me with tired eyes and whispered, "Is it over?" I took her hand and smiled for the first time in weeks. Yeah, baby, it's over. She blinked slowly, her voice barely audible. Did you hurt anyone? I shook my head. No, they hurt themselves. She smiled weakly. Good, because I don't want you to be like them. That simple sentence broke something in me, a weight I didn't know I still carried. I realized then that vengeance hadn't healed me. She had. Months passed. Karen was sentenced to 30 years without parole. Franklin and Carter faced federal charges. The HOA was dismantled, the properties audited, the corruption trail cleaned up. I sold the house in Maplewood Estates and bought a small cabin by the lake where the air smelled like pine and peace didn't feel borrowed anymore. Lily's recovery was slow, but she got stronger every day. The first time she wheeled herself out onto the porch and said, Dad, I'm ready to draw again, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the bullet. Hope. I sat beside her as she sketched the sunset, her hand steady, the sky glowing orange and gold. She looked at me and smiled. You don't have to protect me all the time, you know. I laughed softly. Old habits. Then maybe, she said, tilting her head, it's time to make new ones. I nodded, watching the light fade across the lake. As night fell, I thought back to the moment Karen pulled that trigger, the way everything in my life split into a before and after. But now, sitting beside my daughter, hearing her laugh again, I realized something powerful. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. It's about finding peace even when the world tried to steal it. I wrapped my arm around Lily and whispered, We're finally safe, kiddo. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice soft. You didn't just save me, Dad, she said. You saved us both. And for the first time since that terrible day, I finally believed her.